just a word of friendly warning. I think it will thrill you. It may shock you. It might even horrify you. Well, we've warned you.
Hello and welcome to the Haunt Line, the show dedicated to SoCal haunts and events. I'm your host, Jonathan Casco, and man, do we have some interesting things to talk about today. Recently, Twitter account @HN released 2 Horror Nights maze speculation maps, one for Florida and the other for Hollywood. Now, typically I would brush this off as just your run-of-the-mill Horror Nights maze wish list. However, these guys know things. I don't know how they know things, but they know them. They have some sort of source on the inside that's telling them things that are scary accurate. Here's the proof. Back in April 2019, they released their first version of their Horror Nights Orlando maze speculation map, and outside of the 3 mazes that were already announced at the time, which were Stranger Things, Universal Monsters, and Nightingale's Blood Pit, they were spot on about guessing Killer Clowns, House of a Thousand Corpses, Yeti the Terror of Yukon, and Ghostbusters as mazes for the event. The second version of their map then correctly predicted Depths of Fear and Graveyard Games. That's 6 correct predictions total, 2 map versions in. This is no coincidence, folks. They know things. This leads me to our topic for today. But before we get into that, be sure and go over to their Twitter and give these guys a follow. And thank them for blessing us with this knowledge. Now, let's get into the speculated mazes, starting with Billie Eilish. This rumor has been floating around for a couple of months now, but originally it was rumored that Billie Eilish would be part of the Marathon of Mayhem Lake Show in Orlando. Some of Eilish's music, artwork, and music videos clearly feature horror themes, so personally, I think she's gonna fit right in. Now I wonder, will this be a maze based off of her current music library, or will she be producing a soundtrack for a maze much like Figure did last year for Holidays in Hell? Now, the next maze on this list is one that would be a dream come true for me. I'm talking about Beetlejuice. Now, this may seem a little random, but last year, Beetlejuice was actually featured a lot during Horror Nights Hollywood's 80s throwback nights. And outside of that, you can meet him every day as a roaming face character in the parks. So clearly, Universal still has the rights to the character. This could be a very fun maze, in the spirit of last year's Ghostbusters. Silly at heart, but with lots of scare potential. Speaking of the 80s, the next maze on this list is Gremlins. On March 20th, Horror Nights Hollywood creative director John Murdy wrote that he was, quote, preparing for a big pitch, quote, that he had scheduled for later that day. And his tweet featured a selfie with Gizmo casually perched on his shoulder. Coincidence? I think not. Now, a Gremlins maze would be a lot of fun, much in the spirit of last year's Killer Clowns from Outer Space. And it could make good use of puppetry throughout. Although it's not a traditional horror IP, I think it would be a really fun maze, so I hope that it comes to fruition. One thing that's noticeably missing from both the Orlando and Hollywood maps is Stranger Things. And in fact, it's being replaced by Netflix's The Haunting of Hill House, which makes a lot of sense. Stranger Things Season 4 may not be released until fall 2021. In fact, Season 3 didn't premiere until a year and a half after Season 2, and with the current COVID-19 outbreak, production has halted on Season 4 completely. Bly Manor will be released this year, possibly sometime around October, so it would be the perfect promotional opportunity. But apparently, Hill House won't be the only Horror Nights Netflix property. Next on the list is The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. I must admit, this is a franchise that I'm not really familiar with, but apparently I'm like the only one because everybody loves this show. Season 3, or Part 3, I guess, premiered early this year, and there's a lot of speculation that Season 4 might be released later on this year, maybe even just in time for haunt season. So if the good folks over at HN Nightmare are correct, this year Orlando and Netflix will be sharing Billie Eilish, Beetlejuice, Gremlins, The Haunting of Bly Manor, and The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina as their featured intellectual properties. An interesting lineup for sure, but I'm sure it's gonna be fun nonetheless. Now let's continue down the list of Hollywood mazes, starting with All Hallows Evil. This one makes a ton of sense to me, especially given that the Scare Zone last year was more of a maze anyways. Now, I know that a lot of people have been hoping for a Spirits and Demons of the East maze, but All Hallows Evil just makes more sense, financially even, as more props and set pieces can be recycled from last year's Scare Zone, and even from mazes of the past. But also, to be honest with you, I'm kinda surprised that Spirits and Demons of the East even made it a whole haunt season, especially given how susceptible the haunt industry has become to public complaints about certain things. Next on this list is Universal Monsters. Let me tell you, 2018's Universal Monsters maze is definitely on my top Horror Nights maze list. It was incredible. More than anything though, I was just happy to see Universal using this property at Horror Nights again. It almost feels blasphemous not to. My question is, what will be this year's Universal Monster icon? HN Nightmares predicts it will be The Bride, but in Hollywood's Universal Monster canon, she was sliced up and immobile 2 years in a row. It would be pretty cool to see the Creature of the Black Lagoon as a maze, and in fact, John Murdy once confirmed that they actually have a design ready for a Creature from the Black Lagoon costume. So I say, let's go for it. The next maze on HN Nightmare's map is simply titled Jordan Peele Original, although it would make sense for it to actually be based on his upcoming horror movie, Candyman. Peele made his Horror Nights debut last year thanks to the maze based on his hit horror movie, Us, which was produced by Universal Studios. Candyman is also a Universal picture, so it would make sense to have it as part of the event. Honestly, Us was the best maze at last year's event, so I hope they continue that hot streak with Candyman this year. The final maze on HN Nightmare's list is unfortunately the Walking Dead attraction. On February 1st, it was officially announced that the Walking Dead attraction would be closed to the public on March 4th. It was in this same announcement that Universal casually mentioned that the Walking Dead would have a presence at Horror Nights, leading me to believe that the attraction is not going to be demolished and replaced by anything. It's just reduced to operating seasonally, specifically for Horror Nights, which means that we're going to continue counting it as one of Horror Nights Hollywood's mazes, and that's honestly a giant bummer. Listen, they can easily make this maze exciting again simply by switching up a couple of the scares in each of the rooms. Knott's does this all the time with its returning mazes, and seriously, all it would take is a few tweaks to keep things exciting and to keep return guests guessing. But whatever. Now, what's interesting to note is that HN Nightmares has heard that allegedly a maze location that was used last year will not be making a return this year. And that's the location that housed last year's maze, Pandora's Box. And honestly, I get it. Exiting the maze always had a wait because the maze's entrance shared a narrow walkway with the maze's exit, so traffic always had to be stopped and pulsed. And listen, I'm sure trying to control those crowds during Horror Nights is no fun, so shout out to you, line control peeps. Woo, you're in the front lines, man. Thank you for taking it for us. But that means that we're down a maze this season, which is a bummer. However, if that's not true, if we still get this maze location this year, there are only two things that come to mind that would make sense as a maze for Horror Nights in that space. And I'm talking about Blumhouse and Crypt TV. Blumhouse and Horror Nights have been pretty tight for a few years now. So tight, in fact, that Jason Blum said this.
Speaking of Halloween Horror Nights, is that concept suitable for a Blumhouse movie in the future?
Yes, definitely. We've actually talked about it. We haven't quite figured it out, but there's definitely a movie in Halloween Horror Nights somewhere.
And boy, do they have a lot of movies to choose from this year to turn into a maze. They could choose Fantasy Island, The Invisible Man, The Hunt, the fifth and final untitled Purge movie, or even Halloween Kills. Now let's talk about Crypt TV, a horror production company that has had a huge presence at Horror Nights Hollywood in the past couple of years. Horror Nights plays clips from Crypt TV's monster universe all over the park, which features characters like the Looksee, Giggles the Clown, and the Birch. It seems like a natural move to have a maze based off of these characters, especially given Crypt TV's presence in the parks. So there you have it. Those are the potential mazes this year for Horror Nights Hollywood. I think given this Twitter's history, they may be onto something. So it'll be interesting to see how their predictions match up with what actually gets announced. And well, that is it for us today. But if you enjoy talking Horror Nights and SoCal haunts and events, then subscribe, because that's all that we do here. And if you enjoyed this video, give it a like and then comment down below. Let me know what you think of these maze speculations. And be sure to check out our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher. We talk haunts, we have behind the scene interviews, much of what we're gonna do on this channel, but just in podcast form. And until next time, thank you for calling the Hotline.